In early November, Donald Trump's campaign said it would take on the TV networks about the format and length of future Republican debates. Now the candidate himself is upping the ante.
Fox, for the first debate, ended up with 24 to 25 million people, one of the largest in the history of cable, maybe the largest show, I think, in the history of cable. CNN had 23 million people. It was the biggest show in the history of CNN. This isn't me. This is from showbiz, okay? The biggest ratings in the history of CNN. Biggest. They cover wars, they cover. How about the next debate is with CNN? I won't do the debate unless they pay me $5 million, all of which money goes to the wounded warriors or go to vets. Seriously.
Meanwhile, Trump's campaign said last week 100 African-American pastors were coming to New York to endorse him on Monday. Those pastors did meet with Trump, but there was no endorsement. Here's Major Garrett.
I saw love in that room. I see love everywhere I go.
In New York City, Donald Trump and about 100 African-American pastors discussed racially insensitive comments the candidate had made in the past.
The beautiful thing about the meeting is they really didn't ask me to change the tone. I think they want to see victory because ultimately it is about we want to win and we want to win together.
Trump said he was concerned about the jobless rate of 25% for black teens, almost twice the white youth unemployment rate, 13.8%. That message appealed to Pastor Darrell Scott.
I see leadership, I see strength, I see ingenuity, I see creativity, and I see stones.
Others, like Victor Cousins, were skeptical.
It's very unfortunate the way he has talked to not just the African-American community, but things he said about women and Mexicans and Muslims.
In Iowa, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who previously campaigned with Trump and has avoided criticizing him, today predicted the businessman would falter.
Let me be very clear. I don't believe Donald Trump is going to be our nominee. I don't believe he's going to be our president.
Major Garrett is in our Washington newsroom. And Major, you know, Ted Cruz, as you pointed out, has been reluctant to go after Donald Trump. So is he starting to change that strategy?
Yeah, what you're seeing in Ted Cruz now is his campaign believes that the conservatives in the early primary and caucus states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, certainly Iowa, are beginning to take a long, steady look at his campaign. He's gained 10 points in Iowa in the last 2 weeks. He's now in a statistical tie with Donald Trump. Trump at 25, Cruz at 23. And with the margin of error, they're essentially tied based on the sampling in Iowa. Cruz said today, if the conservatives continue to coalesce around his campaign, it will be, quote, game over. Now, that's a bit ambitious. This race is certainly nowhere from being over, and Cruz is not an undisputed frontrunner, but he has gained traction in Iowa, and this is now, I think, an important turning point because Cruz no longer appears to be afraid of doing anything to either incur the wrath of Donald Trump or incur the wrath of his supporters. He believes he now has enough strength behind him in Iowa to make a case in New Hampshire and South Carolina, and you're beginning to see the turn in his strategy to being one of a quiet, in some cases, obedient cheerleader for Trump and his overall message, anti-Washington message, to one of distinguishing himself from Trump and saying, you know what, he may be interesting, but he won't be the nominee.
Major, I want to ask you about today's meeting. There was a lot of confusion over whether or not the meeting at Trump Tower would actually involve an endorsement from those pastors. What was the campaign's strategy there?
I don't think it really had an elaborate strategy other than fanfare for Donald Trump. I mean, if you want to reduce the Trump strategy to its essential core, that's it. Fanfare for Donald Trump. And so this idea was have a press conference, have as many African-American pastors brought in from around the country as possible, flanking Donald Trump and saying what a great visionary leader he is. Now, some African-American pastors arrived persuaded and left as persuaded as they were when they walked in. And some said that they had a good meeting, will go back to their home congregations, think about it, in some cases pray about it, and maybe endorse Trump in the not too distant future. But this was not the event that the Trump campaign had originally scripted, and some of the black pastors encountered a good deal of criticism on social media about even lending their name to the meeting itself, and that created a secondary dialogue which they weren't in every respect comfortable with, and some of them dropped out, didn't even show up, and those who came in skeptical also, in some cases, emerged skeptical. So this is quite clearly an ongoing conversation.
I want to ask you, Major, about Christie and Donald Trump, because the 9/11 debate continues. We all know, we've heard Donald Trump not backing away from his contention that he saw thousands of Muslims cheering in New Jersey after 9/11. What is it that we have seen develop here? Because it's an interesting dynamic between Christie and Donald Trump. The two are actually friends, but now we have some kind of sharp words being exchanged over this.
Right, so Christie said today it's great to be noticed by Donald Trump. It's kind of a secondary, low-level compliment. And one of the reasons Christie is now on Trump's radar is Christie is gaining some traction in New Hampshire. He got the important endorsement over the weekend of the Manchester Union leader. 20 years ago, that endorsement was really, really important. Now it's nominally important, but everyone covets it, and Christie got it. So now he's on the radar screen, at least in New Hampshire. Nowhere else really, but if he does really well in New Hampshire, that could change the dynamic of the race. And what Christie says is unequivocally what Trump is saying didn't happen. There's no video proof of it. There are no stories to back it up. It didn't happen. What Trump remembers seeing didn't happen in America. It may have happened someplace else, but it didn't happen in the United States. Trump's not backing down from it because he and his supporters are sort of in the same group on this. I remembered it. It's part of my collective memory. That's all I need. And for some Trump supporters, that is all they need. Their collective memory. They share it with Trump. They like that ride. They like the feel of it. It works for them. But Christie's finally saying, look, your collective memory is not consistent with the facts or reality. You're entitled to it as a memory, but you're not entitled to it as a fact.
All right, we'll see if the gloves come off. Major Garrett in Washington for us. Major, thank you.
Sure.